everyone. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've now got 8 in the room and 3 on Zoom. 2 of them are in the car on their way back to us. So they're probably on Teams or something similar. So I'll ask Councillor Mackenzie to open with Karakia.
Kia tau mai te maramatanga, kia tau mai te rangamarie, kia tau mai te kaha me te aroha mō tēnei kaupapa hui e taiki e. Let's be grounded in clarity, let's be peaceful, let's be strong and loving at this issue, bind together, and so it is.
Thank you for that. So welcome to this Policy and Strategy Masterplan, Māpua Masterplan Deliberations. This is accumulation of over 2 years' work by Anna and Dwayne and your teams. I've attended at least 4 or 5 sessions at Māpua in that time. So there's a long list of resolutions, but we're going to do them in groups. But there is a couple of ones that are a little bit controversial that I intend to break out. There's one about Seton Valley Road, and there's one about future detention wetlands. So that's number 2.22 and from 2.35. So those ones in particular, I'm happy to, I think it's best for us to do them individually. And the others, we're going to do them in groups based on the topic. Okay, so I'm not sure Anna's got a head cold, so that's why she's sitting on her own and further away from Dwayne. And I think Dwayne's going to open because Anna's got the head cold, and we'll just go from there. And we've got other staff in the back that are going to help us with particular things as we go through.
They can take as long as they want because they're still going to go and get this.
And if you're on Zoom, you need to turn the sound off, Joe.
Kia ora koutou, good afternoon, councillors. Yes, this is the deliberations report, your opportunity to make changes on the formal consultation process we ran for the Māpua.
Wayne, I'm just going to have to stop you there because I've just found something I hadn't done on the run sheet, so I'm in trouble. So first of all, apologies. I've got an apology from Councillor Butler for lateness, and an apology from Councillor Hill, who's going to be at another council meeting this afternoon. So Deputy Mayor's happy to move. Those apologies were received. They're already on Zoom. They're already on Zoom. Yeah. So I've got moved the Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Walker. All those in favour of those apologies, please say aye. Against? Carried. Declarations of interest. Better do that. No. Right, no late items. Now we'll go, Dwayne, sorry. It's afternoon, we had a big morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is your opportunity to turn your mind to the views put forward by people who made submissions formally and staff advice, and make changes, recommended changes to the master plan. Following on from today, we'll basically view your resolutions as writing instructions, and we'll take up the final master plan up to council for adoption as a complete document. As we go through, as you said, Mr. Chair, we'll take the bit by bits, and there may be a wee spiel that staff just to introduce that section and the gist of the key changes to provide some context for that there are a lot of resolutions. So that's the format we're recommending. Happy to take questions at the initial stage in terms of the process.
Okay, so any questions of Dwayne before we start? We're going to put a map up so that when we go to different areas, I've asked that we have a big map of Māpua up on the screen. And Ro, will you be able to share that with those on Zoom?
Thanks, I can see it.
All right, that's good. Councillor Mackenzie, you've got a question?
Thank you very much. So just before we get into the detail of it, I wonder if I might just have the opportunity to ask a couple of broad questions. So just so that everybody's clear about it, I think it's fair to say that not everybody is going to be satisfied with the result of the master plan. But I think it's important just to cover off, we're doing the master plan under the Local Government Act. We know that it's a background document in the end that actually will inform an RMA process, where through the RMA process people will have opportunities to make submissions, etc. But in terms of the Local Government Act process, if people are unhappy, do they have any rights of appeal, or what is the pathways open to them?
Through the chair, all decisions made by council are subject to judicial review outside of explicitly defined other processes like the RMA. So yes, if they don't like the outcomes here, they can challenge council in the courts on its decision-making process. I feel pretty comfortable, given that we've done 2 periods of early engagement, a formal consultation process. It's fairly thorough reports, over 100 pages, dealing with a lot of individual comments that would be able to defend such a challenge.
Thank you for that. And I wonder, maybe just to cover off another sort of a high level point, certainly I've heard from some people that they challenge the idea of the growth model that we're working to. They challenge the premise that Māpua is a place that actually can accommodate growth. I'm hearing on the news yesterday about the forecast population increases for New Zealand as a whole, and how much of that is driven through immigration. So, maybe it would be just useful to give a bit of an explanation around covering off the point, the challenges that the district is facing with regards to our forecast growth projections, and the importance of Māpua as a settlement and providing for that growth.
Now, do we want to, Anna, do you want to pass that to Jackie? Because she did all that work. She's the guru on the FDS. She lived with it for 3 years.
Okay, I'll try and answer. So I guess just briefly, back in 2020, the Joint Committee of Nelson and Tasman Council decided that Māpua would be part of the urban environment, along with Richmond, Brightwater, Wakefield and Motueka. So I believe the population of Māpua, including Ridley Bay, is currently about 3,000. So it's a reasonable size already, and therefore it's part of the urban environment. So all the obligations under the MPSUD apply to Māpua, as they do to Richmond. We already have a shortfall of about, I think it's 360 houses over the next 10 years in our urban environment. So that's assuming all the zoned land goes ahead and the FDS sites that we've got in Plan Change 81 go ahead. So we still have a shortfall. So we really need to do everything we can to try and find more housing land where we can, and business land for that matter.
Yep, thanks for that. And I suppose, even sites that have been identified, people might have all the will in the world that this is how they see it progressing into the future, but there's no guarantees actually that it will even happen, right? Because things change. So, if we're under already in terms of our growth model, then that becomes even a bigger issue. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely right. I think the plan change, and so part of the plan change process, and also they've been frustrated recently, was them trying to deliver on part of their commitment to meeting growth projections in the FDS, and we saw how that's probably now going to mean a greater shortfall. It just stresses the importance of those places where we can develop, we develop.
Okay, and the one thing we need to remember is we've only allocated time for this meeting till 3:30. If we don't get through, and I know the mayor has to leave at that time, if we don't get through everything by 3:30, we will adjourn the meeting until the 11th of June and commence it at the conclusion of the local waters done well. So just bear that in mind. So it's important that we take our time to get through this. What we don't finish today, we will finish on the 11th. So any other questions before we get into it? I thought it was a very good report, logical. Deputy Mayor Brian.
We could get an update on where the boat ramp consideration is at consent.
My understanding is we haven't had anything back from the commissioners.
Through the chair, I can't answer that because I'm not involved in the process. I guess the only remark I'd make, it's useful having this map up here, is that the proposal that we have in the master plan is consistent with no matter which way that decision goes.
John,
The latest I heard was we're still providing information to the commissioners.
Okay. So we haven't got a final update. They're still asking for more info. So if you have a look at the first level of recommendations, it's the waterfront area. So you're going to briefly speak to that, and then
Yeah.
we'll see if somebody's willing to move the recommendations that's in there.
Okay, so we'll start off with Kite Park, which is what the locals know, this area highlighted in blue up on the screen. Council-owned land, currently zoned residential, and indicated in the master plan that it should be rezoned as recreation. We identified it as an area to be formalised for open space, following feedback through the process. So we've just seeking some minor changes, including amending it to say the master plan state future park rather than future reserve, due to the alignment with the Local Government Act definitions, and also to say future recreation zone, which aligns with the activities that people have indicated they'd like to see on this land. It would go through a separate process through the reserve management plan process, and that's included here as well. Any questions?
All right. So if you look at on your thing, so we can't have the recommendation and the map up on separate screens. So you've got recommendation 1 through to 2.4 is what we'll cover now. So Mike, you've got a question? I mean, Councillor Kinnamore.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman, sir. Kite Park, the waterfront park we had up on there just then, we've nominated some land for commercial use. Now, don't dispute that they're there, but I'm saying, where is the demand for commercial use down there, and what sort of demand do you think would get there? Because we're already saturated with food outlets, alcohol outlets. Now I'm just asking, what other demand that would need to be there? What do you envisage seeing there?
So that's the next slide, the area that Mike's talking about. So I don't know if we can get that up.
Yes.
Yes, it's a recommendation for the next.
It's not in these recommendations, it's on the next one.
Here we go. So it's yeah.
Oh,
There it is. So, I mean, that's up to the market to decide, I guess. But from our point of view, it's sort of future-proofing the wharf area. As we know over time that wharf area is going to become inundated. It allows a commercial node to be developed there. What that commercial looks like, it's really up to the developers to determine that. We do know that we need commercial land, and Jackie could probably talk to the need for more commercial land, and that in our eyes, I guess, is an obvious extension to the commercial that's already there in terms of zoning.
Certainly, when I talk to people out there, they do talk about motels. That has been raised with me by several different people in that area. There's a number of sites. So we've got items. One, which I'm looking for a mover. And I've got a question from Mark. So, Councillor Greenie will ask the question. You might even want to move something.
Yeah, I'm happy to move resolution 1, which is receiving the report. And I just ask for a division across all the decisions, please. Thank you.
Oh yeah, that'll speed it up. That's good.
We've got the 11.
You're happy to move 1. Are you happy to move through to 2.4?
So Kite Park, recreation area. Yeah, I think I'm happy to move that as well.
All right. So Councillor Greening has moved items 1 through to 2.4. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mackenzie. Any further discussion on that item? No? We'll give Ro a bit of time. She's got to get the division. So we'll do this for each and every one, I understand, Councillor Greening?
Yeah, that's great.
And I hope Joe and Brent can hear us on Zoom. There's a division called, so we'll call your name. Hopefully you can reply.
Deputy Mayor Bryant. Councillor Butler.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Dakey.
Or,
Councillor Dowling.
or,
Councillor Ellis.
Councillor Ellis?
Councillor Ellis. Online, but we'll come back. All right. Councillor Greening.
For.
Mayor King. Councillor Kinnamont.
or,
Councillor Mackenzie.
Or
Councillor Maru. Councillor Shellcrest.
Or.
Councillor Walker.
or
We'll come back to Councillor Ellis. Still right back. Councillor Mailing.
For.
And then
Right, well, we've got 2 people that can't hear us, but I didn't hear anyone against. So that motion is carried. So that was up to 2.4. So we're now moving to the Higgs Road area. Dwayne, if you just want to talk on that.
I'll pass that over to Anna, but just a general point. The resolutions largely deal with changes, and just bear in mind that there's a resolution right at the end of the resolutions which basically say all else as per the draft plan. So just bear that in mind, that it's not resolving all aspects of the master plan, just changes for the most part.
okay, so we'll move on to the Hicks Road area. Do you want to get the slides up? So what we're recommending to retain is the inclusion of the elevated brownfield land of Māpua for intensification or infill housing. This was identified. Oh. Sorry. In the future development strategy for intensification, the lower part on the other side of Aranui Road was already also identified in the future development strategy. Here in the master plan, we're only recommending the elevated areas, and it's likely that development numbers will be limited just due to the existing topography, housing layouts. We're sort of estimating about 60 homes, I guess. So that's one area where there's recommended no change. The wider Higgs Road Greenfield land, which is the area that's currently deferred residential. The master plan, the draft master plan currently shows it is a mixture of medium and standard density with green connecting corridors. Some submitters have requested that higher density development is included across this entire area. Such as 3-story walk-up apartments, so quite dense across this whole area. We officers don't believe that this level of density is appropriate in Māpua. We think density height should be limited to about 2 stories, which is in line with the existing houses in Māpua, and that a mixture of density should be provided in this area. Some submitters wish to see more detail around the policy framework, which is normally developed around the plan change, not at the high level of a master plan. And due to this sort of high level of the master plan, we're recommending that instead of identifying these areas of medium density housing along the green walkways and things, which is the sort of the light orange hash areas, that we actually identify this area as just a mixture of standard and medium density, with more detail provided through an outline development plan, which would form part of a plan change, but it would also include the policy provisions around what that density looks like and the design around that density. So it would provide that more information, and people would have the opportunity to submit through that plan change process. So we're just sort of bringing it at a higher level, I guess, and not identifying exact areas for medium density housing.
Okay, so welcome Councillor Maru and Alice. So we're doing on your screen, we're just doing them in groups. So we're doing 2.5 to 2.8, which is Higgs Road area, and Councillor Kittimot's got a question, and I'll look for other questions. And I've got one from Councillor Greening as well.
2 questions. Going back a slide, is that a walkway, cycleway next to the doctor's block?
That green line.
Correct. That's it's a walkway connection connecting the Higgs Road down to the estuary. And that would be included as part of an indicative walkway.
Oh.
And the area of land in front of the yellow hash would be realised through subdivision of that property. So at the moment we don't have that connection.
And one last question for now. We've got all this land we're setting aside for development. We don't indicate any roads or anything like that. Is there a reason why we don't do that, like the good old town planning maps we used to have?
That will be at the plan change stage. So this is sort of a higher level document. We're not trying to get to that level of information, although we are showing reserves and things that we would also show at the plan change stage. Indicative roads, we haven't.
We have indicative roads at plan change area at a time, and then we end up with where the roads are going to go at consenting time. So it's all a stage process. Councillor Greenie.
Sorry, it's just getting a little bit confusing now because I thought staff were indicating that we were going to come to Councillor Kinmoss' question, which was the next slide, and we've jumped to Higgs Street. That was all.
Well, it's Higgs Road, and we're actually going along as in the agenda. So,
Yeah,
when
so
we
the
get-
agenda has a question. I'm just wondering because resolutions don't necessarily follow the report, but there are question 2, which is on what page? No page numbers. Brilliant. Which I think is 6.12, which followed the kite discussion, is I think what Councillor Kinmoth wanted to talk to, and he was told that that was coming, and then we've jumped straight to question 3, which was, or paragraph 7.1, which is Higgs Road area.
following the resolutions.
So this is
There's
where I'm
no
getting a little bit.
change, because the resolutions reflect where there is change.
So when will we discuss elements in the report then, or are we just discussing the resolutions?
The last resolution at the end, Mark.
Okay, so people have to hold on to everything that isn't in the resolutions to come back to. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, they will, and we may not get there today.
Okay. Okay. So, cool. That's just to clarify for Councillor Kinmoth when he needs to talk about that commercial property near Kite Park, which is the discussion at 6.12. Cool. Thank you. I just want to also just broadly discuss the Higgs area. So we heard earlier about the growth model and the growth projections, which are projected on high growth, which has, some would say, has been brought about by opening up vast amounts of land in Tasman and importing a lot of people because natural growth certainly wouldn't drive this growth. And it's been a bit of a vicious circle because we've opened up more land, which has brought more people in. And in some cases, very large retirement villages, which has even increased the population, at least short term, quite substantially. It may drop suddenly if no one takes up new leases as elderly people move on. But so I do question the growth model itself, and I know this is all framed on that. And I know we've had this discussion in the Joint Committee that this growth model is probably a little bit higher than possibly the reality. Especially
Have you got a question, Mark?
Yeah. So it comes. Yeah, I'm just getting there. The question really is, and it's a broader question as we go across the day, which is, we are looking at other areas in this plan. And if we allow a more intensive development here, it means we don't need as much growth in other areas. For instance, those that are taking or seeking to take or develop on Rural 1 land. So it does make a lot of sense that you would look to intensify to meet your growth demand and avoid, therefore, having to grab Rural 1 land, which I think was the basis of, I think it's Tasman 2050's submission. And also consolidates the infrastructural costs that would come from developing this land anyway. So I kind of disagree with, I suppose, the staff advice, which is we shouldn't be doing a more intensive development in this area. I think we should, because that will mitigate the need to go out further. And also there's the other question, as we come more broadly, of one of the tensions I find with this process is that some other people, since this Māpua Master Plan has been considered, have suggested other blocks of land that are not Rural 1 land, but maybe Rural 3 or maybe closer to Motueka, which you'd go, why don't we go there rather than here? Surely we should be keeping that in mind as well. So I do have a problem in the process that we're going through, because if you follow this process of, okay, we're not going to intensify, then you are driven towards having to find growth in other areas, sometimes outside of this master plan, which I think for me is the general pushback from the community is we don't need to go into Rural 1 land. We can intensify in smaller areas. And actually there are other opportunities outside of this master plan that would meet your growth expectations, but the FDS refuses to look at it, and so is this master plan.
Right, Mark, well, I didn't really get a question out of that, but what happens is the master plan is part of our local government process. The future development strategy was decided some years ago through council, and that is our strategy. And we're following the directions of central government, which says we have to provide for more housing. So
Yes, well, that's what my point is.
give it
It
an
should be.
opinion. That's
Yeah,
your opinion. You haven't asked a question.
So my
Thank
question
you.
is,
We're
can
all-
we, what would be the wording required to enable a more intensive development in this area on the resolution? Do I have to vote
The
against the
staff has
resolution to
already
get more
answered that,
intensive?
as part of their consultation. So thanks, Mark. We've heard your opinion, and it was an opinion rather than a question.
Well, my question was, do I need to
The-
oppose the resolution as it stands to get a more intensive development?
You will need to oppose it.
Fantastic, thank
You
you.
will. And in the future, if you could keep it to questions rather than a 5-minute statement, that would help us get through this today. Right. Anyone else with any questions on items 2.5 through to 2.8? No. Well, I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. Councillor McKenzie moves, seconded Councillor Kittermont. We'll just take our time because Councillor Greening has asked for a division on each vote. Deputy Mayor Bryant, you got a question?
Every vote. I do, yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may. So can you just clarify which resolutions we're now considering? No. Thank you. That's all I need.
Can we have the speaker on, please? We can't hear.
Oh, isn't that sad? You couldn't hear me. Right,
benefit of the public
2.5 to 2.8 we are doing, and this is where there have been changes in he has called for a division on every single resolution. I could, but we've got some we have to do. Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Kittermont were the mover and seconders. Some we need to do individually. Right. Items 2.22, which is about Seaton Valley Road, and it's a hail site. And then future detention wetland is 2.35 through to 3.6 and 3.7. Those 4 items I think we should do individually. We're putting the motion. Yeah.
All right. Deputy Mayor Bryant,
For.
Councillor Butler,
For.
Councillor Dakey,
For.
Councillor Dowler,
Or
Councillor Ellis, or Councillor Greening,
Against.
Mayor King,
For.
Councillor Kinnemont,
Or.
Councillor McKenzie,
For.
Councillor Mayling, sorry, Councillor Maru,
For.
Councillor Shallcrass,
or
Councillor Walker,
For.
Councillor Mayling.
or. All right, so I'm happy to entertain a motion to go all the way through, but I would like, I think particularly item 2.22, we could go up to there. So that would get through, or we could, if somebody moves that we do all of them and maybe exclude those 4 items and we do them individually.
Item.
2.22, which is 53 Seaton Valley Road, which is a hail site. I think we should do that individually. And 2.35, future detention wetland, 2.36 and 2.37. Those were the 4 that I had some feedback from fellow councillors and the public that there was some concern about. And I think we should do those 4 individually, and we could do the rest in one lump.
I'm happy to move, with the exception of those.
Right.
I'm happy to move with the exception of 2.22 and 2.35 through 2.37. I'll move the rest.
Okay, so I've got a mover. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Dowler, I've got a seconder. We'll just take our time here. So we've got a mover and a seconder. So if you had, we've removed those 4, which were contentious ones, which we'll do after this. Has anybody got any other questions in relation to this process? Because whatever we do here, we're not going to please everybody, but we do have to provide for more housing. And the one thing I have added out of here is this is not our best land around the district. As Councillor Greening said, our rural one prime land around our other settlements is a real concern. Mayor King.
Just in moving, I think no matter what you do, it's going to be contentious in this space. It's just par of the course. There's been a significant amount of consultation, community engagement, involvement, feedback, submissions, etc. That the key part of this is that somebody mentioned earlier, this is the local government. It actually doesn't have any significant legislative effect, but it sets a framework. My understanding is that a plan change, not a draft plan change, but a plan change will be presented to council in August for adoption. I know people will be frustrated and will be criticism for timing and all the rest of it, but there is a very significant risk that after all of this work and all of the detail and all of the feedback, that if the government comes out with what it's proposing around nationalised zoning, all of this debate about intensification of this size house and that size house and this here and that there and this bit will all be wiped away. Our one ability to slightly avoid that is to get this in place, to get the plan change in process prior to those changes, because Barry indicates that if our plan change is existing, it can continue to run its course, which will give the residents of Māpua and the council the ability to have some of those more subtle conversations about the mix and the exact type of development that might exist in some of these areas. Because without that, once the national zoning, if that's where the government goes, which is what they've clearly indicated, we will simply be deciding whether or not to apply the new national urban zone over one or more of these areas, or the new national commercial zone over one or more of these areas, or the new national industrial zone. All of this nice conversational debate about the exact details will be potentially swept away. So I think time is very much of the essence. Fortunately, we've been through this process. Fortunately, we are at a point where we can get a plan change in train prior to those RMA changes. So, yep, it's not perfect. Do I agree with every single thing in it? Probably not. But on balance, I think it reflects the process that we've been through. And we're better to get it in train and give people get to the point where the legal process effectively starts, which is the zoning conversation, sooner rather than later.
Thank you for that, Mayor King. Any other questions from people around the table at this point? So we're doing everything except for these 4 sections up to 48. And then there is a separate recommendation that we adopt the plan and we approve a budget. So we'll do those 2 are separate. So this is right up to 2.48 with those 4 exceptions. Councillor Kittermont's got a question.
I have got through you, Mr. Chair, sir. Got a question. I've got 6 questions that I'd like to keep to the end because they cover off various aspects of it. But one thing is, it's on my mind, we've already got a master plan. So how does this overarch? Does it take over the 2018 master plan? Because I see here, clause 2.38, we're going to replace maps and action plans and things like that. So does that also relate to the existing master plans in place now? Do we just forget about that and this overrides it?
That's the waterfront master plan you're referring to? Yeah. So this is wider than that, and it will supersede. Yeah.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
All right, so you save your other questions to near the end. Other questions around the table?
I guess I'm just reflecting on what Mayor King has said. So if I replay that back in layman's terms, instead of your highly intelligent terms, I mean, you know, we know that we've got to a certain extent an engaged community who want to be involved. And in actual fact, what I've heard you say is that by getting a plan change notified before we have these national mandated planning rules actually will enable our community to be more involved than they would otherwise. Is that in a nutshell what you said?
Yep. If the government follows through on what it's currently proposing, what we've heard is likely to be the format of the new RMA and nationalised zoning, yes, that's my understanding.
Yep. Cool. On that basis, I'm happy to second.
Councillor Dowler had already beaten you. He was very quick. Moved Mayor King, seconded Councillor Dowler. We'll just wait till Ro's ready. Yeah. There's no other questions, so we're going to put. If you've got a question or a point, we're going to do all of these except for the 4. That's what the mayor's moved. I've asked for questions, and if you've got one, you should ask it now. Councillor Kittimon's got some other questions he wants to ask later, but I've only got that. So I've got no one else with questions. I'll invite the mayor for a right of reply because they have some 2 questions.
It's a short-circuited an awful lot of conversation that I anticipated having. So just to be clear, so you're all clear. I'm not trying to preclude the conversation. If people want to debate the different parts or ask questions or even suggest to the mover that they like amendments, I'm open to all of that. I just want to consolidate it into one resolution rather than a tortuous process of endless division. But if people are generally comfortable, like at the end of the day, like I said, this is not the be all and end all. In fact, it's really just the start of the beginning of a process where people will make formal submissions that will give them appeal rights. There is a fairly long and tortuous process to go before any of this transfers from a high level kind of strategic document through to actual zoning, which starts to impact on people directly and enable development, etc. So I think it's a good model. It effectively shortens up the second part because normally we would do a draft plan change, which would draw out similar feedback to what we've been through with the master plan. So then moving to a notified plan change and kicking off that formal process like I said previously and in answer to Councillor McKenzie, I do think that's the bit we need to get to. Because I think as much as I know people won't see it this way because they'll just see it as us, but I'm quite happy to try and explain to people in layman's terms why getting to that point and enabling them to put in submissions and go through that process under the current rules is likely to give them more ability to influence the final outcome than it may be if it's delayed a year and is done under the new RMAs.
Right, and I must say the engagement that the staff took with the people of Māpua was some of the most extensive I've ever seen, and they did have some very good ways of getting people down. The fact that there was free coffee and there was sausages, there was big turnout.
It's bloody good. I agree. And actually, what it reflects is lots of these the submissions are quite split. Like it's not like everyone doesn't like it.
Right,
they're actually quite even.
Right. So we've had a right of reply, but I will allow Councillor Dowler to ask a question.
Probably Mr. Whiting or Mr. Kirby might have to answer this one. The red dotted line across the Māpua estuary is the future wastewater pipe. And we got blocked at Tapu Bay years ago having a wastewater pipe through a water course. Have we had conversations with the iwi that this one will be okay to happen or not?
I mean, through the chair, iwi were pretty well involved in this whole process right from the outset, and they've had the opportunity to comment on all aspects of it. I personally haven't had any feedback that they're concerned about it. One of the things to bear in mind is Unlike Tapu Bay, which has a reasonable alternative route, the reasonable alternative route here involves 25 kilometres of entirely new main. And what we have there is a main that probably does need increased capacity and resilience, and that is the angle we've taken with it. It genuinely needs both of those things. So not to date would be my answer.
Okay, let's see if we're ready to put the motion. And then we've got 4 others to do.
Deputy Mayor Bryant,
Or
Councillor For. Councillor Jakey,
For.
Councillor Dowler,
For.
Councillor Ellis, For. Councillor Greening,
Against.
Mayor King,
For.
Councillor Kinnamon,
For.
Councillor Mackenzie,
For.
Councillor Maru,
For.
Councillor Shallcrass, Councillor Walker,
For.
and Councillor Mailing.
4. That's carried. Yes. Now I want to move to item 2.22, which is it's the open space, and it's to amend the map location future reserve to fall entirely within 53 Seaton Valley Road as set out in the attachment. That is a hail site. It was a 1940s orchard. There was an assessment done on that soil in 2024, and I got sent the hail report or the soil report yesterday by Councillor Mackenzie, who had been sent it by a member, a resident. I know that we've had hail sites before, and I think there is a process. I would like to amend that motion so that it says we could make it a future reserve, but we need to have the soil remediated or something similar before we accept it. So I'm going to ask the staff if that is an acceptable amendment to this before we proceed. Because to me, we need a reserve in this area, but we don't want to accept land that's we've got to spend a whole lot of money doing the remediation. It should come from the developer.
Through the chair. So the reserve is needed, as you've suggested, and it would also link up to existing reserve water future walkway. At the time of consent, then there'll be conditions put in place, and the soil will need to be brought up to a recreational standard, so that it's fit for use by the public. So that would be set at the conditions and the consent stage.
So it would send a good message to the public, the concerned members at Māpua that were circulating this email, if we say that we'll accept it once the soil is remediated. Is that acceptable? That's what I'm asking staff. Is that amendment?
Through the chair, I mean, it's I'm aware that the reserve team have standards that they apply for the level of service, say, for all reserves. So I think it's in terms of giving the confidence to the community that you're looking for, you could add in there noting that the soil will need to be remediated before council accepts it as reserve, and so that is a very public demonstration of that requirement, but it will happen as a matter of course.
But we need to be very clear it'll be to the recreation standard though, not just because otherwise you'll have people going, they want it remediated to the residential standard.
Yep.
Despite the fact most of the people who live in Māpua currently live on sites which don't meet any of these standards because they were all subdivided before hail was an issue. It was all orchard, ex-orchard land. If they all went and tested their backyards, they'd probably all be living on contaminated soil. So, but we definitely don't want to lock ourselves into a higher standard than the recreational one. So as long as we're clear, I'm happy.
So are you, Rose, can you bring that up with the amendment, or are you able to 2.22? Yeah, everything's fine. So remediated to the recreational standard is the wording I got. Yeah. Because that's not the residential standard, so I understand. The soil or the site is remediated to recreation standard. And I just want to make sure that that's workable for the staff, that's all.
Yeah, and so through you, Chair, so I think what I heard is that it was implicit for staff that is what would have happened. And by putting it in the wording, it's just making it more explicit for the public, but that our own internal processes would have ensured that happened anyway. Is that what I've heard?
That is our position, yes. It will happen, and you wanted to make that more public and clear.
Thank you.
My concern is that I wanted that so that we demonstrated to the public that we had listened to what they said and we were taking that into account. So have I got a mover for that and a seconder? Oh, right, thanks. Yep, I've got Mayor King. Yep, that's fine. Move Mayor King, seconded Councillor Butler. Any other discussion? None. When they're ready, we will put this motion. Yeah, we're doing a division on everything.
Deputy Mayor Bryant.
For.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Dakey.
For.
Councillor Dowler.
For.
Councillor Ellis.
For.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Mayor King.
For.
Councillor Kinnamont.
For.
Councillor McKenzie.
For.
Councillor Maru.
For.
Councillor Shellcrass.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
And Councillor Mailing.
For, and I think that carried unanimously. Right, so we'll go to 35, which is in relation to catchment management plan. And it's 35 and it's or 36 and then it's 37. So those are the ones. Yeah. And my understanding is 37 is just putting it in a budget point. It doesn't mean anything more than that, as my understanding.
Through the chair.
Right, so I'll get the staff to outline this because this is stormwater, and then we've got Councillor Ellis and.
So in this case, yes, we're put to your choice, and it's about. I know we usually take a stand on one way or another, but this one really is a bit of a line call. From a technical perspective, from a whole of catchment perspective, having the land, and you'll know it as a Drury land, helps enable a bunch of things. It also reduces potential risk later on in the future. One of the big things it does is it enables a corridor through what you'll know as Gary Clark's land from the Higgs Road catchment through to a common detention pond, rather than having multiple detention ponds in Māpua, which will be the alternative. The landowner, I'm sure you've talked to, and the key grievance they have is that they're not necessarily opposed to their land forming part of a wider detention and wetland later on, but they are opposed to waiting several years for that to be actioned. And so, so that is why the recommendation, one of the recommendations is if you go down this path, you support budget provision, and it is only budget provision included in the forthcoming financial year to progress that. Now, one thing I want to stress about that, it is a budget provision, it's not the price. Fully, if you go down that route, what will happen is it will go through the valuation process and we'll bring that back to a council decision. If at that point you say, actually, no, then that will be the decision. And what we would be recommending at that point is we amend the maps and the Māpua master plan to remove the subject land at that point. That's the key grievance. If you instead choose to go down the path of saying, let's just exclude it now, which I think is a legitimate option available to you, then I just wanted to point out to you that it will have consequences for some of that other Hicks Road area and what we do with developers around detention there, and potentially maintenance costs. Instead of having a common one, you've got multiple ones. And the juries aren't opposed to that option either. One thing to be aware of, all of that land there is very low lying. And so if we don't acquire that land, there will be future engineering works required at some point to make sure that detention in one paddock doesn't have a negative effect on the water table in another. So just be aware of that. Ian, did you want to add anything to that in terms of the benefits, cost, pros?
Through the chair, in particular, if we don't get that connection link now, the 120 Hicks Road site, which is proposed for residential and a commercial parcel next to that woodworks factory there, would need a detention uphill of that in the shorter term, and that detention would then be on residential land. So there'd be a slight disadvantage. And so we miss the opportunity now. There is some chance that they will successfully sell their whole parcel, and that we would lose the future opportunity to make the parcel we're talking about part of the overall wetland. Technically, right now, we don't need the land because neither the development nor the future rainfall is with us now. So in the fullness of time, we probably could handle it either way. It's more obviously an easier pathway to go now to secure that land, apart from the financial implication.
I've got, this is obviously an interesting topic because I've got 5 people on the list, and Tim, you're second. All right, so Joe, you're first. Councillor Ellis is first. Right, so I've got a mover, and you didn't want to speak to it, so Mayor King.
I have a question. Can I ask my question?
Yeah, cool.
Thank you. Do we need to have, given that yesterday in the annual plan conversation, we passed a resolution for $1 million budget for this, do we need to have and approve a capital expenditure budget of $1 million in 25-26 for acquiring? Because I'm actually comfortable with just acquiring, leaving the budget conversation to the thing we've already passed yesterday. And on balance, like I've been round and round and round this, and I'm presuming valuation is going to take account of the low-lying nature, the actual practicality of it being developed residentially, and that may or may not agree with the quotable value assessment of the value of this property. No doubt the juries will get a valuation, and somewhere in all of that, it'll come out in the wash. Having thought this through, I don't know how many sections we're talking about developing in the wider Seton Valley area, but it's several hundred. The stormwater development contribution is how much?
So Warrini, something
$1,000 times.
It's 80% of the cost, possible.
There is a lot of revenue coming back in the stormwater front. The only 2 caveats I have is the valuation thing and any impact it has on future purchases of land in that location or offsetting of RFCs, where if we set a benchmark that's so high in terms of the value of that land for stormwater detention, and then we're faced with, oh, well, you paid this much for that, that's now what you have to pay or what you have to knock off RFCs or DCs for other land that we want to take. So that's my kind of concern. But I think on balance, if we get through the plan change, if we get this in place, so that development happens reasonably soon, which seems reasonably likely given the landowners involved, that actually we're going to get our money back, and that ultimately it will be a better outcome at some point down the track, even if that's 20 years from now, than not having that land. And it probably also reduces one pressure point or tension point in the overall conversation, which is going to be challenging anyway. And so on balance, I'm happy with the resolution as moved if it just removes the capital expenditure thing. If the mover,
I'm going to ask the mover if she's happy to.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Right. So, all right. So
second it on that.
Second, so it approves capital expenditure without an amount in 25-26 for acquiring Seton Valley Road. So you just take out capital expenditure, you take out budget of $1 million. All right.
Through the chair, I mean, when this report went out, it went out before the annual plan report. So I accept that you could probably just remove 2.37 altogether. The mayor's logic is sound. It's redundant.
Well, I thought you would still need 2.37. Yeah.
Through the chair, you've actually approved the budget provision as part of the annual plan process next year. So effectively, 2.37 has already been executed.
Okay. All right. As long as you're happy with that. All right. So I've got some other questions first before. So we're just doing 2.36 is the staff recommendation. And is the mover happy with that?
Yes.
Yep. All right. I've got Councillor Kinnemore.
I've got a few, through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, sir. Got a few questions. The catchment management plan is very aspirational. And now we're going to be adding some detailed modelling figures to it. I'd suggest that the catchment management plan, what I've seen, needs to be rewritten to include these. It's not just a tack on, I gather. That's the first one. Yeah, I'll do it one at a time for you. How's that sound?
Thank you, through the chair. The communication of the modelling was not very clear in the documentation we put publicly. There's been extensive modelling of both the stormwater flooding and the interaction with coastal inundation. Very little of that got into the public forum. There was 2 maps in another part of the documentation, and some of the submitters were unhappy with that. And we've now put out the public hazards viewer in the interim, which allows a lot more information out there in the public, and we'll do further public presentation of all the flood modelling and the coastal inundation that we have already. And then, as the report noted, the government will be driving us to do more modelling as we go forward. And so as that comes to pass, we'll make sure that's all public as well. So there's not much change actually required now. We do need to just make sure the final catchment management plan includes the links to all the modelling that's already been done.
Okay, so the modelling is not part of the master plan at the moment. It's separate. That's one question. Okay, got that. The detention pond. I'm going to ask the question naively. Why are we buying land where a developer further on up will need to control the stormwater runoff from the subdivision? Why are we buying this now? Why can't he buy it? My question, why can't he buy it?
Essentially, it's the using power of the council to have one facility that achieves multiple goals rather than having 5, 10 different detention basins. The way our land development manual is written is we've pushed developers towards a detention basin rather than detaining on site in small boats. And so as each block went forward for development, they'd all propose a detention basin. They'd all want to vest those with the council so they don't have the ongoing requirements. That's less efficient than us buying the bottom of the valley and developing it as one detention basin, treatment basin, which can also then tie in with the re-establishment of the natural wetland components and the recreational fields next door. Overall, it's been deemed to be the more efficient plan. I wasn't here in council when that was decided, but I can see the logic of it.
And through the chair, I just might add, there might be a perception that there's just one developer. There are about a dozen land parcels that would drain into this area. So it's the fact that we're picking up the stormwater detention for all of those parcels in one place rather than in 12 separate ones.
Okay, all right. I'll think about that one until the very end. Oh, I've got down here some rather. So the fast track application. Should I keep this conversation until the very end? But where is it at with that? Is that part of the development of the Seaton Valley and part of the development of that land there? So it's not mentioned in the master plan. I know it's separate, but we need to give a story out to the people who are going to read this as to what's happening, what made us do these decisions now?
It's a separate process completely that we have no control over or decision-making power in. So it's not something we could consider through the master plan. We weren't aware that initially that they were going to do that fast track application, and whether they do or don't, we can't influence that process.
Through the chair, the only thing I'd add to that is to date, the developer up on the hill, Andrew Spittle's consortium of 4 different developers, they have wanted this process to run through, and they want the plan change to go through, and going through the normal consent pathway is actually, at least of a few weeks ago, their preferred pathway. What they have is a fast track consent in their back pocket. They're one of the listed entities. So should this process go belly up, they have it as a fallback, as far as I'm aware. And actually, you raise a good point. Potentially, one of the things that we should be doing is approaching them and seeing, once we got past this process, whether they're prepared to put a joint positive statement out around, going to the next plan change process and getting things underway.
I would second that motion if there was a motion. I think the more information we can get out there, the less negativity we're going to have around this. So can you please tell me, around one last question here? Can you please, around the table, convince me or tell me that by buying this land now, we're not feeding into the pockets of a developer or other people in the future, making it life easy for them because we're using public funds now as opposed to them doing it later on. So it's no benefit to
Through the chair, this parcel of land isn't owned by the one we're talking about. It's a budget provision, not the decision to buy, but I get the nuance. The key thing, I think, is the thing the Mayor alluded to, is that we need to go through a proper process of valuing the land, because whatever we land on, it will act as a precedent for the much larger piece of land immediately upstream from this. And so that, I wouldn't call it lining their pockets. It's just a disciplined process. We need to go around valuation, because effectively we don't want to pay more than we value the land. Otherwise, it will have many millions of dollars implications when we go to acquire the next bit.
Okay, I've got Councillor Walker next.
Thank you, through Chair. Just one clarification. So Tasman District Council previously has done land purchases to enable infrastructure or sites for infrastructure when and as is needed in the past to ensure future growth in our community.
Yes, absolutely. Walk Creek program is the best example I can think of. It's a many $1 million program.
Thank you. So this decision today is not outside of the norm, and I personally believe the Druze have been through enough. I like the way that you've re-engaged with them, and I will be supporting this resolution going forward, and happy that 2.37 has been removed, because we did go and discuss that and put it through yesterday. So thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Deputy Mayor Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question in relation to the resolution itself at 2.36, where in the second half it says shift the walkway alignment to connect with a drain. Really?
Yeah, through the chair, one of the other points that Drury's raised in their submission is that the current access kind of dog legs along and runs along to the southern eastern boundary of their property, right next to their property, and across an easement they have for access across Gary's land onto the road. And so there is an alternative, which is to run through 125 Māpua Drive, Gary's land, along a creek that runs through there. And I have discussed it with that landowner, and he is absolutely fine with it. He intends to develop that property regardless of whatever decisions come out of this. He will put a consent in. His intention is to put a consent in for a rural residential lot development. So that'll be an opportunity to talk about that drain and that corridor.
So should the wording be connect with an alignment alongside the drain? Surely you're not going to put it into the drain, per se.
Apologies. Yeah, maybe poor worded. alongside would be fine. Thank you for pointing that out.
One slide amendment there. So that's all, Deputy Mayor. I've got Councillor Mackenzie next, and then Councillor Shelford.
Thank you. So on this topic, we've got the resolution from yesterday to put the budget provision into the annual plan. And now we've got this resolution to retain the map, I guess. We don't have anything that explicitly talks about the process we're going to go through and the ultimate decision making and what information would come to the table in order to make that decision. So do we just sit here and assume all that will happen without having to be more explicit about it?
Look, I kind of took it for granted that we would follow from the process I've said. And if you want a resolution along those lines, I have no issue with it whatsoever. That's fully our intention.
Yeah, no, don't.
As to whether it's necessary, I don't know. Do you kind of trust us or not? I don't know.
I guess I'm just making the point. I don't consider it necessary because I think I'm aware of what will happen. But I guess what is going through my mind is that I guess potentially you could have this as a solution and all this happens. It might be that actually you get to a point, you know, willing purchaser, willing seller, that actually it doesn't, you know, everything's for a price, right? And whether it works or not, I've got no idea. But so when the ultimate decision needs to be made, it would need to be, well, you've got an option to go down this path or an option to go down this other path, because you have to weigh them up.
Through the chair, in terms of path, do you mean a go, no go decision on the acquisition? Yeah, I mean, that would be essentially the decision would bring to council. That was my intention.
Okay, I might not be making myself clear, so I won't carry on with it, but all good.
All right. Councillor Shelford? Yep, he's good. All right. So you're happy with that resolution? Councillor. Oh, no, somehow I missed you off the list. Sorry. Councillor.
Okay, yeah, they're all left out. Everyone's gonna have to go. Yeah, I was falling asleep. No, waiting. There's a total of 9 million in the LTP for these works in the area. Is this outside that 9 million, or is this going to be within that 9 million in the LTP?
Look, I'd like to be able to tell you it's within. I actually think it's an addition, because I think that very roughly in my head, you know, it's something like there's something like 4 million provision for land purchase for the balance of the land further up from stormwater, and another 1.5 or something like that for reserves share of that contribution.
Yes, so I guess, but to Councillor Mackenzie's point too, is in the future step, as we make another decision going forward, we'd hope that it would reflect the options around possible savings and offsets, because really theoretically there shouldn't actually even be an addition here, because the other option would have had costs as well. So I'd like to hope there is actually, in the future, we see how this is actually, but that's another point just within that way of discussion around the final. The other point I've got is you've got in 1511, you've got 75% of stormwater project costs are funded from developer contributions. What's the 25% in this return? What is the public good component of this?
Through the chair, it's one of the things you have to legally turn your mind to when doing the cost allocation for projects that have a growth component, and you want to recover that growth component through development contributions, is you have to look at who causes the need for the works development and who benefits from the work. And that benefit test is a much broader thing. You have to consider whether there are benefits, even if the project isn't caused by the existing community, but whether if there's a benefit to the existing community. In this case, the community clearly told us they valued the wetland portion of the works that are funded from stormwater, and I can't actually remember how the 25% was got to, but the way we typically do it is we look at a catchment, And we say, okay, well, a lot of it's caused, who is the benefiting party? And we do a prorated allocation.
Okay.
So that's effectively reflecting.
Yeah, so it's a review of the whole catchment, and that would be the wetlands aspect, which is recreation, nature, environmental benefits. So that's included within that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's all the questions that I've got, but I want to come back to the mover and the seconder, Councillor Ellis and Mayor King, because they've actually, the staff have amended it to say proposed walkway alongside the drain. Okay, are you happy with that? I'm getting 2 nods. Okay, are we ready to put the motion? And we're just number 36. Right. Oh, write a reply. I thought Joe. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, through you, Chair. No, I'm just asking that people support this recommendation. Having been in a position where you live in limbo for a large number of years, when you look at your land being taken for the benefit of the rest of the community, I can't explain enough about the impact that it has on people's lives, and that is part of the reason that I am supporting this. There's no doubt that this land will be of benefit to the entire community. The community is already talking about how they would like this land to look, with a lot of discussion at a number of community meetings I've been to about how they would like this wetland to behave, what kind of walkways they would like through it. So they just about feel like they own it already. And I think we have an obligation as a council that development is painful for those communities that are in there, and we've seen that through this process. And we can make it as less painful as possible. I fully support the pathway being moved over to where a developer is looking to develop land and not passing through that parcel of land. So just please ask that you support this recommendation.
All right, thank you for that. And we will put the motion now if we're ready with the division.
Deputy Mayor Bryant.
For.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Dakey.
For.
Councillor Dowler.
For.
Councillor Ellis.
For.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Mayor King.
For.
Councillor Kinnemont.
For.
Councillor Mackenzie.
For.
Councillor Maru.
For.
Councillor Shallcrass.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Mailing.
For, and that's carried unanimous. Now I want to move to page, doesn't have a page number, to the very end where it says recommendation to the Tasman District Council. So we'll bring up that thing, which is, and the motion reads that the Tasman District Council adopts the Māpua Masterplan, including the Māpua Catchment Management Plan, and approves a budget in 25%.
Through the chair, you can, same logic for 2 can be removed.
Yep, 2 can remove, so we just need 1 then. Would someone like to move? Move Mayor King, seconded to Deputy Mayor. I'm sure I saw you nod. And we're just going to slow down. So, go back again, sorry, so we're on the final 2 motions. And I can't see the page number on my system, but it's a recommendation to the Tasman District Council. Yeah, and it is that the Tasman District Council adopts the Māpua Master Plan, including the Māpua Catchment Management Plan. Full stop. Yeah, I'll do that. I've got Mayor King moving that simple motion and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'm actually going to ask for general questions unless the Mayor has got one first.
No, look, I'm happy for you to have general questions.
All right. People with general questions before we do this last motion. We're not going to be here till midnight, Councillor Kinnemont. So you're first.
Thank you, through you,
And
Chairman. Sir.
Councillor Greenie.
Anna, I haven't seen anywhere in here about the Sea Scouts. The Sea Scouts building. The last I heard from them was that the discussion was that they were going to move off the wharf and into a building in the domain. Is that still happening?
I'm not sure what the Sea Scouts
Ta-Maha Sea
intentions
Scout.
are. In terms of what we could provide for them through this, I understand what they would like to see, and we've tried to enable, I guess, the use of, I think Richard's still here. Yeah, Richard probably can talk to it a bit better than I can. At least the Māpua domain building.
So they've still got their building in the domain at the moment, and they've not come forward with any suggestions other than extra storage at one point for equipment, which I presume they may push further if they're moving out of the wharf area.
Okay, so I'll leave you guys sort that out. Grossi Point was part of the previous master plan, which is this one's now taking over the top. In that previous master plan, it had cultural assessment, it had what else did it have in there? Sharing, parking. It had quite a lot of points in there under years 6 to 10. So are we just going to ignore all that work we've done before, or because it doesn't appear to be included in this master plan today?
It is included in the master plan. So the cultural heritage management plan for Grossi Point is included. And there is still a requirement for that to be done. We have a budget, understand, through reserves to undertake that work.
I believe so.
Can we have a rough date when it's going to go? Because it's been 5 years since the last one.
So the master plan probably delayed the cultural assessment plan. So wait until we got that feedback, but it's certainly in our sight.
Just through here again, just clarifying that the master plan is circulated is still the base document to which these resolutions are amended. We'll bring the complete package back to you at full council. So everything that was in here that hasn't been changed today is still relevant.
Okay, and then one last little question. Thanks for your tolerance, everybody. Ian, yes, he was at the hall the other day. Absolutely stunning night. It should have actually started the process, I think, with some of the questions there. Well, what's happening to those guidelines now? When will we see them?
So Ian Munro, we engaged him to do some work with the community around character and identity of Māpua, which came through as really strong feedback, and that they'd like to see a design guide for any new development in Māpua. So it's progressing for the next step, which is the plan change. So that the work that Ian does will form the basis of the design guidance brought into the plan change.
Okay, one last question. I remember I wrote it down here. I'd just like to thank the Mayor very, very much for offering to come to the next Māpua meeting on the 9th of June at 7:30 in a Māpua hall. We explain all what happened today. I'll take up that offer.
Okay.
And the meeting starts at 7, by the way, not 7:30.
All right. Right. Other questions? Councillor Greening, a question?
Everyone else gets to make a statement and I have to ask a question. My question just is in relation to the earlier resolution, the omnibus resolution passed by Councillor Mayor King. He excluded 22 and 35 to 37. So hasn't this already been passed? And if it hasn't, I'm also calling a division over this as well.
Yeah, no, this bit hasn't been passed because I didn't include it in it. So
no, but the Mayor's resolution was to pass everything excluding 22 and 35 to 37.
but it wasn't in the numbered ones. So we're going to do this, and I'm happy to call a division. I've been calling a division for you every time, and a lot of them have been unanimous, so that's fine.
Thank you.
Any other questions around the table? No. Would the mayor like to write a reply?
I only to say, coming to Councillor Kinnamon's second to last point, I think, about design guidance, that is all the sort of things which may also not necessarily be enabled post RMA changes. So that level of detail / influence / kind of bespoke direction for different communities may well not be something that you can roll out. The government, certainly Chris Bishop as the Minister for RMA reform, has been fairly clear that he doesn't like that degree of whatever the word is, detail being provided. He likes broad sweeps of zones that enable lots of things to happen without pesky councils being too much involved in directing where things should take place. And what we tend to find is communities are the reverse. They like us to be very specific about where things can and can't take place, and what they'd like to see. And I don't always agree on what that is, but they do tend to like a greater level of detail. So I think that will enable us, well, this will be the first step in hopefully enabling us to have that discussion in the more formal plan change process. So with that, I'm happy for it to be put.
Okay, with that, I'll put the motion, right?
Deputy Mayor Bryant,
For,
Councillor Butler,
For,
Councillor Dakey,
Or
Councillor Dowler,
for,
Councillor Ellis,
For,
Councillor Greening,
Against.
Mayor King,
For,
Councillor Kinnamont,
for,
Councillor Mackenzie,
For,
Councillor Maru,
For,
Councillor Shallcrass,
for,
Councillor Walker,
For,
Councillor Mailing.
for. The motion is carried. I'd like to thank everybody for their work today, and especially the staff. I think it was one of the best consultation processes I've ever been involved in. And the engagement from the community was outstanding. And you see that in the submissions and those posters that they put up. This must have driven you insane in some ways, Anna, because it was so difficult. It was a bit like an FDS in another way in a smaller area than what Jackie had to do. But thank you again. I'll ask Councillor Mackenzie to close with karakia.
Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa ponamu, te moana, aroha aru, aroha mai, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou katoa.
And I think that's us for the day, and it's 3 o'clock.
the new RMA will probably never